This horror story tells of a bloody rebellion and the wronged souls who haunted an official's family, sowing terror. In those years of chaos, enemy armies breached the gates, and the people everywhere fell into misery. Besides slaughtering, the people were also forced to shave their heads. To the populace at that time, cutting their hair was an unacceptable humiliation, filling their hearts with indignation and resentment. Unable to endure the oppression and brutality, a group of people resolved to rise up and fight. A man named Tian led a group in revolt. They attacked the city, slaughtering indiscriminately. They especially targeted the families of the officials. No one was spared, all in revenge for the people who had been killed. Their hatred for those who had sold out the country for their own glory ran bone deep. They could not forgive those traitors who had bowed their heads and served the invaders. They tortured the traitors by using iron needles to pierce a hole in the top of their heads and then inserting pig bristles, an incredibly savage and cruel act. The number of people killed was truly countless. The rebellion had turned into a bloody massacre, spreading terror throughout the entire city. In the end, however, they were all rounded up and captured by the government troops. Even so, they had inflicted countless casualties on the enemy army. There was an official named Wang. After the chaos of the war ended, he led his family back to their home, hoping everything had returned to peace. Arriving home, they found the entire estate piled high with corpses. Blood truly flowed like a river. He ordered his servants to quickly clear all the bodies away. The servants began the task of clearing the corpses, an incredibly grim and haunting job. Some fainted at the sight of the decaying bodies and the stench of putrefaction. Although they had already filled several carts, the number of bodies was still overwhelming, impossible to count. After dragging them all outside, they had to douse the grounds with water and scrub meticulously to clean away the bloodstains and the foul stench. However, the residence was no longer peaceful. When night fell, strange things began to happen, terrifying everyone in the household. At night, in the inner and outer courtyards, ghost lights would drift about. Their eerie green glow flickered in the darkness, creating an incredibly ghostly atmosphere. Along with this came the sound of wailing ghosts. The cries echoed in the dark, carrying a sorrow and desolation that terrified all who heard it. The official and his wife could not sleep. He began to grow angry, unable to tolerate this disturbance any longer. He threw on his robes, grabbed his sword, and went out the door to investigate. As he walked, he shouted threats at those strange, aggrieved souls. The official reached the main gate and had just pushed it open when the scene before him made him freeze in terror. The wailing souls outside were horrifying. He immediately regretted his actions. Had he known how terrifying they were, he would not have loudly challenged them. Outside the gate stood the ghosts of those who had died miserably in the chaos. They were screaming and shrieking, their faces twisted and demonic. The official hurriedly slammed the gate shut before they could lunge at him, not daring to say another word. He did not want to face these ghosts again. From that day on, as soon as night fell, the sound of wailing ghosts would rise up from every corner of the official's residence. Everywhere, there were mournful cries demanding justice. And not just at night. Even during the day, those ghosts could be seen, constantly harassing the living. The ghosts could be seen all over the estate. They drifted everywhere, sending the residents into a panic. They still retained the appearance of their gruesome deaths. They would wail piteously, revealing their demonic faces, endlessly lamenting their fate. After their mournful cries, they would beg for help, for they were forced to wander. These souls could not pass on. They could only linger restlessly in the mortal world. Everyone in the household, from the masters to the servants, was scared out of their wits, living in constant fear. No one could live in peace. There was a room in the estate known as the gatehouse. Strange things frequently happened there, and no one dared to go near it. In the middle of the night, someone would often be heard pounding violently on the estate gates. The sound echoed in the darkness. One night, the gatekeeper decided to see what the problem was. He summoned all his courage, gently slid the bolt, and opened the door to look. Though terrified, he was also curious. Behind the door, a massacre was taking place. A gruesome scene of bloody slaughter, a horribly realistic reenactment of the massacre from all those years ago. The gatekeeper saw countless people being brutally killed right before his eyes. Severed body parts were scattered everywhere. Overcome with terror, he could bear it no longer and fainted from fright. He had never in his life seen such a horrifying sight. After he collapsed to the ground, all fell silent outside the gate. Everything was plunged into a dreadful darkness and silence. After several days of this, the people in the residence truly could not take it anymore. They went to the official to beg him, hoping he had a solution. The official, too, could no longer endure the disturbances. For many nights, he had not had a moment's peace and was filled with rage. He summoned monks and Taoist priests to hold a great ritual of deliverance for the dead. He hoped this act would help the souls pass on and return peace to his home. The monks chanted sutras for many days. The sound echoed everywhere, carrying a solemn reverence, hoping to pacify the spirits. The servants used large cauldrons to cook rice. They wanted to prepare a sumptuous feast as an offering to the ghosts, praying for their swift deliverance. They arranged 100 portions of food in the courtyard. Each portion was carefully prepared, the aroma of the hot food rising invitingly. Everyone hid inside their rooms, not daring to go out. They didn't want to disturb the spirits, but they were also intensely curious to see what was happening. They peeked out through the cracks in their windows. The sight before them truly terrified everyone. In the courtyard, hundreds of ghosts were fighting over the food. They devoured everything like hungry ghouls. Among them was the gatekeeper, who had been unconscious for days. He, too, had become a ghost, fighting with the others for food. After eating his fill, the gatekeeper seemed to regain some strength. He slowly shambled back towards the gatehouse and disappeared. It turned out that ever since being frightened that night, he had fallen into a coma, unable to escape the horrifying nightmare. He suddenly woke up and announced that the ghosts had left and would no longer haunt them. That day, many people saw it. Columns of black smoke rising from the official's house and flying away, a sign that the wronged souls had departed. From that day on, the residence was no longer troubled by ghosts. Their lives returned to normal, no longer spent in fear. This strange story tells of an official who came from a wealthy family. His ancestors had left him a large estate, so his life was prosperous and worry-free. Before his parents passed away, they found him a virtuous wife. She was dedicated to taking care of her husband. Every night before bed, she would prepare water for him to soak his feet and tenderly ask if it was warm enough. The wife always gently cared for him, asking if he was tired, but the official spent his days carousing, finding life utterly bland and boring. Their marital life was harmonious until his wife became pregnant and they could no longer be intimate. Every day, she would see him off to work, reminding him to come home early, unaware that his heart had changed. He began to frequent brothels, falling for a beautiful courtesan. He quickly became deeply entangled in this extramarital affair. When his wife was 10 months pregnant, the time came for her to give birth. She endured extreme pain to deliver the baby. The midwife beside her continuously urged her to try harder. While his wife was struggling with the pain of childbirth, the official was passionately wrapped up with his mistress, the courtesan. His wife gave birth to a healthy baby boy. The delivery was extremely difficult, and she almost died from postpartum hemorrhage, but she fortunately survived the critical moment. Enchanted by the courtesan, the official listened to her instigations. She sweetly tempted him to elope, promising they would be together forever. Heeding her words, the official heartlessly abandoned his wife and child. He secretly gathered all the wealth and money in the house and hurriedly left in the dark of night. He and the courtesan got into a horse-drawn carriage, claiming they were going to his cousin's place 800 miles away, beginning their journey of escape. After many days of hardship, they finally arrived. The official thought he would now live a blissful fairy tale life with his mistress. But to his dismay, he had fallen into a clever trap, deceived by his mistress and her accomplices. It was all a play designed to seize his assets. All the gold and silver the official had brought with him was stolen, leaving him penniless in an instant. In a fierce struggle, he tried to reclaim his money, but the group of people beat him half to death, leaving him powerless to resist. The official was thrown onto the street, without a penny to his name, with no relatives in a foreign land. He was completely destitute. With nowhere else to go, he could only seek refuge in a dilapidated, abandoned temple to spend the night, his body both in pain and cold. In his hunger, cold, and pain, the official suddenly remembered his wife and young son at home. Regret and despair began to well up in his heart. His tears fell profusely, regretting the mistakes he had made. The official thought he was about to die in this desolate place and would never see his wife and son again. As he was drifting in and out of consciousness, he was startled to see someone walking into the abandoned temple. The figure looked very familiar in the dim light. He was astonished to recognize it as his wife, who should have been at home thousands of miles away. She appeared with an unusually calm expression. Seeing her husband in such a pathetic state, the wife did not scold him. She gently asked if he was hungry and brought him food. As the official ate the delicious food his wife had prepared, he couldn't help but burst into tears. Every tear was filled with regret and humiliation. The official knelt before his wife, repeatedly admitting his fault for being unfaithful to her and their child, cursing himself for being less than a man. The wife only listened quietly. The wife did not blame him. She only gently told him to get up, saying that a man's knees are worth gold and should not be knelt so easily before others. She also took out some money, saying that it was enough for his travel expenses to return home, hoping he would set off soon to reunite with his family. The official was very surprised, as he had taken all the money in the house with him. He didn't understand where his wife had gotten this money. The wife calmly explained that she had sold a few items from their home to get this money, all to help her husband return. He then wondered how she knew he was here, how she had traveled such a long distance, and who was at home taking care of their young child. The wife did not answer these questions. She only instructed her husband to take good care of their child after he returned, and that she had named their son Fu Kui. After giving her instructions, the wife's figure gradually faded into the air, leaving the official alone, desperately calling her name. The official woke up with a start as if from a nightmare, no longer seeing his wife. He thought everything that had just happened was just a dream. But when he looked down, he saw the plates of food and the money bag still there, leaving him completely bewildered and in a daze, not knowing what was real. Despite his many doubts, he took the money, hired a horse-drawn carriage, and began his journey home, his heart filled with turmoil. After many days on the road, the official finally arrived home. He stood at the door, calling his wife's name, hoping she would come out to greet him. But when he pushed the door open, he was met with a terrifying silence. No one came out to welcome him. The air in the house was unusually cold. The official walked into the bedroom, and the sight before him was truly horrifying. His wife had been dead for many days, her body cold and stiff, but their young son was still trying to breastfeed in her arms. The official embraced his wife's corpse and wailed tragically. He realized that it was her soul that had traveled thousands of miles to bring him money to return. He buried his wife, his heart broken and filled with deep regret. He knelt before her grave, holding his son in his arms, swearing to change his ways to atone for his mistakes. He raised his son alone, making him a decent man, to make up for his past mistakes. And from that day on, the official never remarried. This peculiar story recounts that there was a wealthy man named Lee. His family owned thousands of acres of good land, making them one of the richest and most powerful families in the region. He also owned dozens of magnificent mansions and was known for his philanthropy. The only thing that troubled him was that he was over 50 years old and still had no son. In his household, he had only one daughter named Xiao Shang. She was the only joy and source of comfort for the entire family. The couple loved their daughter dearly, cherishing her like a precious gem. They always gave her the best of everything, never letting her suffer any hardship. However, at the age of 14, the girl contracted a serious illness. The illness came unexpectedly and took her life. After his daughter's death, Mr. Lee became seriously ill from grief. He was bedridden, unable to recover from this great shock. To have a male heir, and also to bring good fortune, he married a concubine. He hoped that this would bring good luck to the family. At the end of that year, the concubine gave birth to a healthy baby boy. The whole family was overjoyed and named the boy Li Chao. However, although the boy was born healthy, he was a bit simple-minded. By the age of 6, he was still stammering and speaking incoherently. Despite this, Mr. Lee still loved his son very much. He would often carry the boy on his back, taking him for walks around the streets, not feeling bothered at all. One year, a blind demon monk appeared in the city. He could foretell people's fortunes and misfortunes and often demanded money. If not, something bad would happen. That day, Mr. Lee happened to encounter the demon monk on the street. This fateful meeting was the beginning of a series of tragedies that were about to unfold. The demon monk held out his hand and demanded that Mr. Lee give him 100 taels of silver. His unreasonable demand made the wealthy man feel annoyed and angry. Nevertheless, he reached into his sleeve, saying he only had 18 taels. He intended to give it to him just to get rid of him. However, the demon monk insisted on a full 100 taels, not a penny less. His arrogant attitude made Mr. Lee even angrier. After searching everywhere on him, he only had a total of 30 taels. However, the demon monk refused to accept it and still insisted on the full amount he had demanded. Seeing that the demon monk was being so unreasonable, the wealthy man Lee didn't bother to argue anymore. He simply waved his sleeve and walked away, not wanting to waste any more time with such a greedy person. The demon monk then shouted a threat. He yelled, warning Mr. Lee not to regret his decision, and then cast a malicious curse. As soon as the angry wealthy man Lee returned home, he heard the painful screams of his son, the boy Lee Chow. His wife ran out frantically, reporting that their son was not well. The boy was writhing on the bed in pain for no apparent reason. He was screaming tragically, unable to control his actions. Mr. Lee immediately knew that this was the demon monk's doing. He could not have imagined that he would act so cruelly and quickly. He quickly went to find the demon monk, begging him to spare his son. He pleaded desperately, hoping to save his only son. However, the demon monk was not moved. He pushed him aside and swaggered away, showing no pity or regret for what he had done. When he returned home, the boy Chow was no longer breathing. The couple embraced each other, sobbing uncontrollably, unable to accept this heartbreaking truth. After their period of mourning, filled with resentment, he wrote a formal complaint and sent it to the magistrate. He was determined to seek justice for his unfortunate son. The magistrate sent his men to arrest the demon monk. After a struggle, they finally managed to capture him, not giving him a chance to escape. The demon monk was escorted to the main hall of the yamen. He would now face the punishment of the law for the crimes he had committed. When they searched the demon monk, they found a small coffin, 2 wooden figures, and 5 colorful flags. These were the items he used to perform his dark magic. The demon monk refused to reveal the purpose of those items. No matter how they interrogated him, he remained stubborn and would not say a word. The magistrate saw that his crimes were unforgivable and ordered him to be beaten to death. A wicked person like him did not deserve to live and should receive a just punishment. Although the demon monk was dead, his son could not be brought back to life. The pain of losing their son was still there, and the couple could not heal their broken hearts. Every night, the couple would embrace each other, sobbing in agony over their beloved son. That night, as they were sitting in their room, a boy suddenly walked in. His body was transparent. He was clearly not a living person. A very strange and frightening sight. After walking in, the boy profusely thanked Mr. Lee. He said that his father had walked too fast, and he had almost been unable to catch up with him. The boy's appearance made the couple scared and they recoiled. They didn't understand why a ghost would appear in their house at this time. He trembled as he asked if the boy was a human or a ghost, his heart filled with confusion. After asking, they learned his identity. The boy was one of the 2 wooden figures in the demon monk's bag. He was originally from another place and had been captured by the demon monk during a trip. When he was young, he had been enchanted by the demon monk's dark magic. He was turned into a tool to carry out his wicked schemes. He had been murdered, and his soul was locked in the wooden figure. The demon monk used his dark magic to control him, forcing him to harm people, a tragic fate. After the demon monk died, he was able to escape. He suddenly knelt down and offered to be adopted by Mr. Lee to repay him for helping him clear his name. In his astonishment, Mr. Lee also wanted to adopt the boy, but he was afraid that since he was a ghost, how could he adopt him as a son? Seeing that he was about to agree, the boy revealed a way. He said that if his parents allowed it, he could borrow the undecomposed body of the boy, Chow, to come back to life. They dug up their son's grave and covered it with a cloth. After that, they chose an auspicious hour to open the coffin, preparing for a very important ritual. In the coffin, the boy's body was still intact, like that of a living person. This made the soul swap much easier. The boy's soul then turned into a faint blue smoke. It quickly flew straight into the body of Li Chao, beginning the process of taking over the body. A moment later, Li Chao opened his eyes. A few days later, he could eat and walk around normally. A real miracle had happened. He was no longer simple-minded, but had become very intelligent. His change made the couple both happy and a little scared. In this way, 2 years passed, and the wealthy man Li suddenly contracted a serious illness. He was bedridden and might not recover. Although they invited many doctors and he took all kinds of medicine, his condition did not improve. The whole family was very worried and didn't know what to do. His son continuously knelt and kowtowed at the head and foot of the bed, muttering to himself. He said that his father had done good deeds all his life and begged the 2 figures to show mercy. He said that 2 evil demons were sitting at the head and foot of the bed. If he couldn't convince them to leave, his father would surely not recover. After his pleas had no effect, at dusk, he chased all the servants out. He talked to the air, and the door opened on its own. It seemed that someone had walked in. A moment later, he saw the person out, saying, "Thank you for your trouble. As long as my father recovers, that's all that matters." His mother was curious and asked what he was doing. He said that he had invited an expert to take the 2 evil demons away, and his father would get better soon. Sure enough, before long, Mr. Lee was able to sit up. After a few days of rest, he had fully recovered, and another miracle had happened. At the age of 18, Li Chao passed the imperial examination. However, at the age of 20, he contracted a skin disease, and his skin turned blue. To avoid punishment from the heavens, he no longer spoke to the ghosts of the underworld. This peculiar story is about a man named Lee. His family was not very wealthy, but they were well off and lived a peaceful, prosperous life. The family had a young son. He was a good boy, so his father loved and doted on him very much. Every time he sold the harvest, the boy's father would give him some coins to buy candy. For a child, this was a great joy. That day, the boy was holding the money his father gave him, happily running to buy candy. On the way, he suddenly saw a beggar lying on the ground, groaning. The beggar was kneeling on the ground, his head bowed, looking very pained. The boy went over and kindly asked if he was okay. When asked, the beggar said that his addiction to alcohol had relapsed. However, because he had no money, he couldn't buy any wine to drink. The boy was very generous and loved everyone. Seeing the beggar's pitiful state, he decided to help him without any hesitation. The boy used his candy money to buy wine. He ran to a nearby tavern, his heart filled with eagerness to help someone. With wine to drink, the beggar no longer felt uncomfortable. He tilted his head back and drank it voraciously, satisfying the craving that had tormented him for so long. The boy was very curious. He didn't understand why the strong, spicy wine could make people so infatuated, so he asked. The beggar held out his wine gourd to the boy and said that if he took a little taste, he would know immediately. The offer piqued the boy's curiosity. Out of curiosity, the boy took the wine gourd and took a sip. He had no idea that this action would completely change his life. The strong and spicy taste of the wine made him cough uncontrollably. This uncomfortable sensation made him unable to understand why people like to drink wine. The beggar took out a few pieces of meat from his pocket and told the boy to eat a piece to mask the spicy taste. He said that was the way to enjoy wine better. The boy took a piece of meat and put it in his mouth. He had no idea that this piece of meat was not a normal food, but something else. The beggar told him not to chew, but to swallow it whole immediately. Listening to him, the boy swallowed the meat in one gulp without any suspicion. After everything was done, he said goodbye to the beggar and went home. This strange encounter was quickly forgotten by him. From then on, he suddenly became addicted to alcohol. At every meal, if he didn't have wine, he would feel uncomfortable all over and couldn't swallow his food. In this way, he drank wine for more than 10 years. His alcohol addiction became more and more serious, and he could not give it up. By the time he was in his 20s, he had become an obese man. At every meal, he had to drink a whole jar of wine to satisfy his craving. Although he was addicted to alcohol, he still married a virtuous wife. The family's wealth did not decrease but grew more and more, and they lived a very prosperous life. One day, a foreign monk came to visit their house. His appearance brought a major turning point to the young man's life. The monk said that there was a tongue bug in his stomach. It was this bug that made him addicted to wine and able to drink a lot without getting drunk, which was very strange. The monk said that he had a way to remove the tongue bug from the young man's body. If he did that, he would be able to return to being a normal person. Seeing her husband become more and more obese also worried his wife. She told her husband what the monk had said, hoping he would agree to the treatment. He reluctantly agreed. According to the monk's instructions, he lay down on a wooden bed in the courtyard and they tied his hands and feet tightly so he couldn't move. Before long, he felt very thirsty. He wanted to drink the delicious wine that was hanging above his head, but he couldn't reach it. After a while of struggling, he felt something wiggling in his stomach. His throat also itched, a very uncomfortable and scary feeling. A large red lump of flesh wiggled and slowly crawled out of his mouth. This horrifying sight made everyone shudder. The lump of flesh flew straight to the wine jar. It landed on the mouth of the jar, as if it was very eager to taste the delicious wine. It wiggled and slowly crawled into the wine jar. This scene was very bizarre and scary, and it was something that the witnesses would never forget. The monk seized the opportunity and put the lid on the wine jar. He had successfully captured the tongue bug, freeing the young man from his addiction. He ordered them to untie him and told him to go and look. He was still in shock after witnessing the horrifying scene. He saw that half of the wine in the jar had been drunk. The lump of flesh even had eyebrows and eyes. It looked very ugly and gruesome, not a normal creature. To repay him, he gave the monk a lot of money. He thought that the monk had saved his life, completely unaware of the truth behind it. He saw the monk off at the gate, his heart filled with gratitude. However, he did not know that he had also seen off his life's good fortune. From then on, he saw wine as his enemy. Just smelling it made him nauseous. His weight also quickly dropped, and he became very thin. Along with his weight, his family's wealth also began to decline. In just 2 years, all his assets were gone, and his life became difficult. In the end, he was left with only a few barren fields to farm and make a living. His life had completely changed and was no longer what it used to be. Some people said that the thing the beggar gave him that year was a prosperity bug, not a tongue bug. Having lost the bug, he could only live a life of poverty.
Please, sit. Eat. You must be hungry after your long journey.
This peculiar story is about a man named Lee. He was a person with a very kind and gentle heart, who was also very willing to help others. It could be said that whenever he saw someone in trouble and didn't help, he would feel uneasy. He was always ready to help people on his journey. One day, Lee had to go on a long trip for business. He refused an offer for a ride from someone, seeing that their donkey was already struggling. As he was walking, he suddenly saw an old woman sitting alone by the roadside. She looked tired and lonely, as if she needed help. Seeing this, he immediately approached her to ask about her situation. He kindly asked why the old woman was sitting alone in this desolate place and if she needed any help. The old woman replied that she was on her way to visit her daughter. However, due to her old age and frailty, she was exhausted and could not walk any further. Worried that it was getting dark and wild animals might appear, he offered to carry the old woman for a safe distance and knelt down to give her a piggyback ride. He carried the old woman forward. The old woman was grateful for the kindness of the young man, while he humbly replied that it was just a small thing, not worth worrying about. After a few miles, someone came to welcome the old woman into a courtyard. Lee waved goodbye and continued his journey. Because he helped the old woman, his journey was delayed. It was completely dark, but he still hadn't reached the city, so he had to continue walking in the darkness. At that moment, 2 savage wild wolves suddenly appeared behind him. Their blood-red eyes glowed in the dark, looking terrifying. Lee was utterly terrified and had no choice but to run for his life, trying to escape the pursuit of the hungry wolves. When he was almost exhausted, a large mansion suddenly appeared before his eyes. He had no other choice but to run towards it to seek help. Surprisingly, a man rushed out from the mansion. The man held a wooden staff in his hand, his face filled with extreme alertness as he saw Lee running towards him. The man used his wooden staff to drive away the wolves that were chasing Lee, saving him from imminent danger just in the nick of time. Lee was extremely grateful to the hero who had come to his aid. The man said there was no need for thanks and invited him inside the mansion to meet their master. He was curious about the master of the mansion, but the man remained silent, and his face suddenly became frightening with his vacant white eyes and a strange smile. As he walked into the courtyard, Lee was horrified to see a person tied to a tree. This sight made him shiver with fear and worry. The person's hands and feet were nailed to the tree trunk, looking incredibly painful. The agony was clear on their face, but they could not scream or move. Looking closer, he became even more horrified when he realized that the woman being tortured was his sister-in-law, his brother's wife. He didn't understand why she was here. Lee quickly approached, worriedly asking his sister-in-law why she was there and what had happened. He tried to understand the reason for this strange event. However, his sister-in-law paid no attention to him. She seemed unable to see or hear him, only looking up at the sky in agony, ignoring his questions. The man who had saved him quickly urged him to move forward. He said that their master had been waiting for a long time and should not be kept waiting any longer. Lee felt extremely scared and made an excuse that he was busy and would return another day. He just wanted to leave this terrifying place immediately. However, as soon as he turned around, 2 fierce demon messengers appeared and blocked his escape route. They stood there like 2 statues, not letting him get away. Just as he was in a state of extreme panic, a man walked out of the house. The man ordered the demon messengers to step aside so as not to scare the honored guest. Although the man had a fierce appearance, he treated Lee very politely. He said that he had invited him because he was grateful for his kindness in helping his mother. After entering the house, Lee learned that the master of this mansion was the son of the old woman he had given a piggyback ride to earlier. At this moment, Lee could finally feel somewhat at ease. The master of the house offered him a cup of wine to show his gratitude, while he humbly replied that it was just what anyone should do. After a few sips of wine, he could not suppress his curiosity. He asked about the situation of his sister-in-law, who was nailed in the courtyard, wondering what crime she had committed. The man explained that his sister-in-law was a wicked person, and she was currently undergoing punishment. The skin disease on her hand was also retribution for her evil deeds. The story was that his sister-in-law could not bear children. When his brother took a concubine, she treated this concubine with extreme cruelty and harshness. When the concubine gave birth, her intestines prolapsed. The brother was overjoyed to have a child and had no idea of the cruel plot that was about to be carried out against his wife. Using the excuse of visiting her, the sister-in-law approached the concubine's bed. She secretly hid a needle in her hand, preparing to carry out her wicked act. She used a small needle to stab the concubine's prolapsed intestines. This act was done in secret, and no one knew about it. Ever since her recovery, the concubine had to endure severe abdominal pain for no apparent reason. She had no idea that she had been harmed by someone else. Lee knew his sister-in-law was harsh, but he never expected her to be so wicked. He begged the man to forgive her, promising to talk some sense into her. The man also showed respect for him. He agreed that if his sister-in-law could truly repent, he would no longer punish her and would give her a second chance. After the feast, the man saw Lee off at the gate. He thanked him and said there was no need to see him off any further, then quickly left this strange place. After he had walked some distance, Lee looked back. The large mansion had disappeared, and all that remained was a dense forest. Everything felt like a dream. Upon returning home, he immediately went to his brother's house. Before he could even step through the door, he heard his sister-in-law inside viciously scolding the concubine. It turned out that his sister-in-law's skin disease on her hand had relapsed. She was in so much pain that she was taking her anger out on the innocent concubine next to her. Lee walked in and shouted at her loudly. He warned his sister-in-law that if she did not start living a virtuous life, she would have to endure this pain forever, and it would never end. However, His sister-in-law not only ignored his advice but also yelled back at him. She said that it was not his place to teach her how to live. Lee then exposed all of her evil deeds. He said that the gods knew about her act of stabbing the concubine with a needle, and the illness on her hand was her retribution. Upon hearing this, his sister-in-law's face changed. As she heard him recount what he had seen in the mansion, she became even more frightened and restless. From then on, she truly began to change. She diligently chanted scriptures and performed good deeds. The illness on her hand slowly subsided and eventually healed completely. When the concubine gave birth to her second child, she found a skilled doctor to remove the needle from her intestines. From then on, the two women lived harmoniously together. Later, Lee had the opportunity to visit the capital. When he saw the statue of the King of Hell in a temple, he finally realized who the person who had invited him that day was. This peculiar story is about a scholar who was blessed with a great fate. He not only inherited his ancestors' fortune, but also married a virtuous and beautiful wife. The scholar was a lazy man, sleeping until noon every day. His wife would gently wake him, reminding him that the food and soup had already gotten cold. All his meals and daily needs were meticulously taken care of by his capable wife. He only needed to enjoy life and was even nourished with bird's nest soup by his wife. Yet, having a wife as beautiful as a celestial maiden, this scholar did not cherish her. He still had a philandering nature and paid no attention to his wife's feelings. Every few days, the scholar would go out. His virtuous wife could only gently remind him not to come home too late, her heart filled with worry and sadness. He often hung out with his bad friends, those who only knew how to indulge in debauchery. They would meet, greet each other, and then go to inappropriate places. His friends would tease him, saying that Lee already had a wife as beautiful as a fairy, but still went out to seek pleasure with other women. He would just laugh and reply that they were just fleeting pleasures. He smugly said that his heart only had room for his wife, but his actions were completely contradictory. To the scholar, frequenting brothels was just a refined pleasure. His friends had to exclaim that he was truly a man of great fortune. The scholar always believed that all his escapades were just for fun, and they were not worth worrying about or letting them affect his family. While the scholar was having fun outside, his wife at home would always keep a lamp lit, anxiously waiting for her husband to return until late at night. The times were chaotic, and the Northern Army rebelled. One day, the Northern soldiers stormed into the city, plundering and killing, causing widespread devastation. After burning and looting the valuables, they also kidnapped many innocent women from the city to satisfy their lust, causing countless separations. Unfortunately, his wife was also among the women who were taken to the military camp. She was terrified, but still tried to preserve her dignity. The Northern soldiers intended to defile her. Facing danger, she was determined not to be sullied. She had already made up her mind. To preserve her chastity, she was resolute in not yielding. She took the sword from a soldier's waist and decisively took her own life, choosing death to protect her honor. Her body was thrown by the inhumane soldiers into a pile of corpses by the roadside. She died alone and unjustly amidst the chaos of war. When the scholar returned home and did not see his wife, he immediately knew she had been taken away. He frantically called her name in vain, his heart breaking. He cried and ran everywhere to search for his wife. Under the dim moonlight, his sorrowful calls echoed in the quiet night. Finally, amidst a pile of cold bodies, the scholar found his wife. She lay there motionless, her face still showing traces of terror and pain. The scholar painfully held his wife's body, trying to shake her awake, but it was all too late. She had passed away forever, leaving him alone with his deep regret. In his extreme agony, the scholar held his wife in his arms and swore to the gods and demons of heaven and earth that he would never be unfaithful again, vowing to be with only her for the rest of his life. He silently carried his wife's body back home. Now, his heart was filled with only pain, regret, and ultimate loneliness. Every day, he carefully washed and cared for his wife's body. At the same time, he continuously prayed to the gods and demons, hoping his wife could come back to life. More than 2 months passed, and a miracle happened. His wife actually came back to life, weakly calling out her husband's name. The scholar's prayers had been answered. The scholar was overjoyed. Finally, after days of praying and waiting in despair, his beloved wife had truly awakened. The couple embraced, sobbing uncontrollably. This moment of reunion erased all the pain and separation, leaving only boundless happiness. Keeping his vow, the scholar no longer frequented brothels. Every day, he stayed by his wife's side, caring for her and keeping her company, living a peaceful life. 2 years passed, and their life was happy, but his wife had no children. She was worried and suggested that her husband take a concubine to continue the family line. The scholar adamantly refused. He said that he had sworn to the gods and demons that he would not marry anyone else besides her, and he would not break his vow. Seeing her husband's resolve, his wife had no other choice. She tossed and turned, and a plan for a win-win situation came to her mind. So, she came up with a plan. She chose a beautiful maid. Every night after the scholar had fallen into a deep sleep, she would let the maid into the room with her husband. The maid would take her place and be with the scholar while he was sound asleep, completely unaware. Everything happened in absolute secrecy. After the maid became pregnant, the wife took her to her parents' hometown to rest, to prevent the scholar from discovering the shocking truth. Thanks to this plan, the maid gave birth to a son and a daughter for the scholar. Whenever the wife went to visit, the children would happily run out to greet their sister. More than a decade later, the wife fell seriously ill. Before she passed away, she called the scholar to her bedside, deciding to reveal the secret she had kept for so long. She weakly said that he actually had children to continue the family line. She recounted the entire story, instructed him to be good to the maid and the children, then peacefully closed her eyes. The maid and the 2 children entered the room. They didn't know about the secret from years ago. They only knew that this was the man their mother had told them to recognize as their father. The 2 children and the maid knelt, calling the scholar father and master. The 3 of them didn't understand why the mistress had arranged things this way. The scholar was completely confused about what was happening. He looked at his deceased wife, then at the people before him, his mind in a state of chaos. The maid then recounted the entire story from years ago, about how the mistress had swapped her into the room every night to help the scholar have children to continue the family line. The scholar was now stunned and awakened to the truth. He screamed in despair, realizing that all this time he had unintentionally broken his vow to the gods and demons. As soon as he realized the harsh truth, the scholar suddenly felt a sharp pain in his chest. His vow had come to pass, and the punishment of the deities had been delivered. He collapsed next to his wife's bed. After a period of thrashing, he took his last breath, following his beloved wife, keeping his vow until the very end. The maid buried the couple next to each other. Although the ending was tragic, the scholar had been a wayward man who turned over a new leaf, a man of great loyalty and virtue. This peculiar story recounts that in a certain county, a new magistrate had just taken office. He was a greedy and cruel man, and the first thing he did was to force the people to pay taxes. For those who could not pay the tax, he would personally lead his men to their homes to demand it. He had no regard for the misery of the people under his rule. He never bothered to understand the real situation of the people. He would only yell loudly, questioning why they wouldn't pay their taxes, regardless of their reasons. If anyone dared to refuse payment, claiming the tax was too heavy and they couldn't afford it, he would not hesitate to use the most brutal methods of punishment. He would order his subordinates to arrest those people. They would be put in stocks and paraded to the yamen to be subjected to extremely harsh and cruel interrogation and punishment. Each time, he would arrest 3 to 5 people at once. They would be chained together and paraded through the streets to serve as a warning to others, spreading fear. Those who were arrested all knew that this journey would be a one-way trip. They could only cry and beg for their lives in vain, but their pleas were ignored. One day, when he was out on the streets arresting people again, there was a Taoist priest in the crowd. This priest spoke out, commenting on the magistrate's arrogance. The Taoist priest loudly commented on the matter, saying that an official should not disregard human life so easily. Everyone thought he was being reckless. Sure enough, the magistrate heard him. He immediately ordered his subordinates to arrest the Taoist priest as well, without a moment of hesitation or thought. However, the Taoist priest showed no fear or intimidation. He maintained a calm expression as if he had already foreseen this happening. He obediently followed the soldiers to the county yamen. His calm demeanor made the people around him curious, wondering what kind of person he was. As soon as they entered the gate, they saw several corpses. These were people who could not pay their taxes and had been tortured to death by the magistrate. A truly tragic sight. Some of the more timid people were so scared that they urinated in their pants. This horrifying scene terrified them to the core, and they could not remain calm. When they reached the main hall, the people who had been arrested all knelt down, but only the Taoist priest remained standing. The magistrate was furious and asked why he would not kneel. The Taoist priest said that he knew very well about his actions. "You have only been in office for 100 days, and you have already tortured 58 people to death. That is truly too cruel," he said. The magistrate did not care whether the Taoist priest was prepared or not. He immediately ordered his subordinates to use the harshest punishment to deal with him. His subordinates tried to hold the Taoist priest down, but they couldn't. They had to stand and beat him with sticks, but each blow was like hitting a log. The Taoist priest gently shook his hand, and the chains on his body broke. He easily freed himself from the restraints, astonishing everyone. He went out to the courtyard and hit a tree with his palm. The blow was so powerful that it caused the leaves on the branches to tremble and begin to fall. The Taoist priest warned the magistrate that if he did not repent, the day the leaves on this tree fell off would be his last. He would not be able to escape his fate. There were only a few leaves left on the tree. Every time the magistrate committed an evil act, a leaf would fall, like a countdown to his end. The magistrate did not believe those words. He yelled loudly, ordering his subordinates to arrest the Taoist priest, thinking he was just a deceitful sorcerer. A few of his subordinates drew their swords, ready to rush forward and capture the Taoist priest. They had no idea that they were facing a man with extraordinary power who could not be underestimated. Suddenly, a whirlwind rose, carrying the leaves from the tree and enveloping the Taoist priest. He said that if the magistrate repented, there was still time. A final piece of advice. When the leaves dispersed, the Taoist priest had vanished without a trace. He had left, leaving behind confusion and fear for those who witnessed it. His subordinates were all terrified, but the magistrate still didn't take it seriously. He believed it was just a trick, not worth worrying about. He continued to use brutal methods to exploit the people. He had no intention of changing and continued on his wicked path. Not only did he cruelly force the people to pay taxes, he also brazenly plundered, seized property, and took innocent women. He paid no mind to the Taoist priest's warning and even had a defiant attitude when someone tried to caution him. He continued to arrest and torture innocent people without a shred of pity or regret. Every time he committed an evil act, an innocent person would curse him to die a terrible death. The curses of resentment piled up against him, and each time this happened, a leaf fell from the tree. The remaining leaves grew fewer and fewer, signaling that his final day was not far off. He, a county official, acted like a common bandit. He burned houses, plundered, and raped. There was no evil deed he wouldn't commit. In just a few short days, his crimes had piled up like a mountain. He had caused countless suffering and tragedy for innocent people. And in just those few short days, all the leaves on the tree had fallen. The Taoist priest's prophecy was about to come true. His subordinates were horrified to see that all the leaves had fallen from the tree. They knew that this was a bad omen, and something terrible was about to happen. Just as the Taoist priest had said, the magistrate's final day had arrived. His fate had been sealed and could no longer be changed. One day, the magistrate was sitting at his desk. Suddenly, he stood up and screamed in terror, as if he had seen something. His hands flailed wildly. It seemed that there was something extremely terrifying in front of him, making him unable to stay calm. He fell to the ground and died suddenly, just as the Taoist priest had said when the leaves fell, he had to atone. As you sow, so shall you reap. This peculiar story tells of a high-ranking official. He was a man of power who was given an important mission by the imperial court. The official was tasked by the court with a diplomatic mission to another country. It was a long journey, crossing the vast and dangerous open sea. He and his retinue boarded a large ship to begin their voyage. Everyone saw him off with the hope that the journey would be smooth sailing. Throughout the journey, his spirits were high. The large ship sliced through the waves, sailing for many days on the vast, wide sea. One day, as the official was standing on the bow of the ship to admire the scenery, the clear blue sky suddenly changed color, signaling that something ominous was about to happen. Thick black clouds began to gather, obscuring the entire sky. The scene became dark and frightening, and a tense atmosphere enveloped the entire ship. An old sailor quickly approached him, advising him to take shelter in the cabin. He said that ahead lay a notoriously dangerous patch of water. The official did not understand the sailor's meaning. He curiously asked what was strange about that water that made him so worried. The old sailor explained that this area of water often had strange phenomena. He advised everyone to go into the cabin and maintain absolute silence. Seeing the sailor's serious expression, the official immediately ordered everyone on the ship to go into the cabin for safety. The official sat in the cabin, calmly enjoying his tea. He tried to remain composed, waiting for the ship to pass through the dangerous waters he had been warned about. Suddenly, a loud noise echoed, as if something had just fallen onto the ship. The ship began to shake violently, terrifying everyone. The official quickly stood up and, along with his retinue, went out of the cabin to check what was happening. He wanted to find the cause of the shaking. As soon as he stepped out of the cabin door, the sight before him terrified him and those with him. An unbelievable thing had appeared right before their eyes. A gigantic dragon was lying motionless on the bow of the ship. Its entire body was soaking wet, and it looked very tired and exhausted from some battle. Hearing the noise, the giant dragon startled awake. It glared at the official and the others with angry, wide eyes, as if threatening them. The official was so scared that he was about to scream. Just then, the old sailor quickly covered his mouth and pulled him into the cabin to avoid danger. The old sailor whispered, reminding him to be silent. He said that it was a falling dragon, and they should not disturb it to avoid bringing disaster upon themselves. A moment later, the ship shook violently once more. Everyone in the cabin could only hold their breath, praying for this danger to pass quickly. The giant dragon had left the bow of the ship and dived deep into the water. It disappeared into the dark water, leaving everyone in shock and fear. The official was still in a state of astonishment. He couldn't believe that dragons were real, and that one had fallen from the sky so unexpectedly. The old sailor explained that this area of the sea was called the Falling Dragon's Pool. Dragons who had violated the heavenly laws were banished here, which was why the sight was common. As they were talking, a member of the retinue suddenly looked out the window and screamed in terror. The scene outside was even more frightening than what they had just witnessed. The official quickly looked outside. The sight before his eyes stunned him and the others, leaving them speechless with horror and awe. Several gigantic dragons were falling from the sky. They plunged straight into the sea in a fierce battle, creating thunderous roars. The dragons fell into the water, creating huge columns of water. They writhed in agony, struggling desperately in the vast open sea. Their collisions and thrashing caused the ship to shake violently. Everyone on the ship could only hold on tightly to each other, trying to keep their balance. The old sailor quickly shouted, telling everyone to hold on tight and remain silent. He said that once they passed through this area of water, everything would be all right. The large ship continued to move forward, sailing through the sea filled with falling dragons. Their journey became extremely arduous and dangerous. After about the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, the sea surface gradually became calm again. The dragons were no longer falling, leaving an unusually peaceful atmosphere. The official thought that the danger had passed. He and the old sailor stepped out of the cabin to check the situation outside, hoping they were safe. However, as he leaned on the railing and looked down, he became tense once more. An even stranger sight was appearing right below them. The water below the ship was unusually clear. At a depth of several dozen meters, dozens of gigantic dragons were coiled, lying motionless at the bottom of the sea. A few of them began to swim towards the ship. They raised their heads, staring at the people on the ship with eyes full of curiosity and alertness. The official was utterly terrified. He worried that if they attacked, the whole ship would capsize and everyone would die at sea. Just then, the old sailor took something out of his cloth bag. He swung his hand, scattering the substance onto the water's surface, acting very calmly. When the dragons saw this, they all retreated simultaneously. They no longer swam towards the ship, but dived deep to the bottom of the sea, disappearing into the dark depths. The old sailor continued to scatter the substance into the water. He did this to ensure that the dragons would not return and endanger the ship. Thanks to the sailor's actions, the dragons in the water stayed away from the ship. Finally, the ship safely passed through this dangerous sea. The official was full of admiration for the sailor, regarding him as a deity. He was curious and asked what magic he had used to make the dragons so afraid. The old sailor smiled and explained that it was just a small trick he had learned. The substance he scattered was only white rice, but it had an unexpected effect. The official showed great respect for the sailor. He said that for the remainder of their journey, he would fully trust and rely on his experience. After that, their journey went smoothly. However, on their way back, they deliberately took a detour to avoid the sea of falling dragons, not daring to take any more risks. This strange tale tells of a young woman who had a bizarre encounter, gave birth to a divine child, and the many ups and downs of her life. Shu was an ordinary girl. She lived a simple and quiet life. She was 16 years old. At this age, most girls in the village were already married, but Shu was not. She was an incredibly hard-working person, toiling day after day without complaint. That day, she went to the riverbank to wash clothes. From a distance, she saw a clump of vibrant green moss slithering through the water like a snake. As it passed by her feet, it snatched away a piece of clothing. This surprise startled and frightened her. Shu immediately dove into the water to retrieve it. She didn't want to let her clothes be washed away. She reached out and, luckily, managed to grab the clothing. She thought the incident was over, with nothing more to worry about. However, the clump of moss had wrapped itself tightly around her leg. It had no intention of letting go and only tightened its grip. It then crept up her leg and pulled her under the water. She could not resist its strength and could only struggle. After pulling Shu under, it moved over her body like a living creature. The sensation made her shudder. Itchy and terrified, Shu thrashed about. She wanted to escape the moss's grasp, but was completely powerless. After a moment, just as she thought she could no longer breathe, the moss pushed her back up to the surface. She had nearly drowned. The clump of moss swam away like a snake. After it left, Shu remained deeply haunted by the incident. Shu returned home in a daze. She had no idea that this strange encounter would completely change her life. After that day, her belly began to grow larger. Her mother, seeing this, was worried but also questioned her, asking if she had been secretly seeing a man. Shu told her mother the strange story of what had happened at the riverbank. She wept, not wanting her mother to misunderstand her. After carrying the child in secret for 10 months, Shu gave birth to a baby boy. A tiny new life had entered the world, bringing hope and joy to the family. The boy looked bright and lovely. His birth brought Shu an immense joy that made her forget all her previous sorrows. To keep others from seeing him and gossiping, Shu, though she couldn't bear it, had no choice but to hide the boy in a cabinet. The boy gradually grew up. Until he was 7 or 8 years old, he had never once been outside. One day, the boy said that he was grown and it was time for him to go out and explore the world. He insisted that he wanted to live a free life, to roam the world and become a great hero. As soon as he finished speaking, he jumped down and walked out the door. His mother quickly chased after him, frantic with worry, begging him to come back and not to speak such nonsense. But his mind was made up. He promised he would return one day to arrange her funeral rites, and that he would keep his word. Before leaving, he gave her one more instruction. He said that if she ever wanted anything, or if the house lacked anything, she just had to go to the cabinet that had raised him, and she would receive it. The moment the boy stepped out the door, he transformed into a great gust of wind. The wind carried him far away, leaving no trace. Her son was gone. He had left, leaving an immense, inconsolable emptiness in his mother's heart. After that day, he never returned, leaving Shu and her mother to rely on one another, their lives filled with hardship. Their family situation grew worse, and they were hit by a bad harvest. With not a single grain of rice in the house to cook, the two women were in despair. In her desperation, Shu remembered her son's words. She looked at the cabinet, and a fragile glimmer of hope sparked within her. Shu went and opened the cabinet. She prayed that her son was right, that she would find something to help them survive, so they would not starve. Inside the cabinet, there was indeed a large bag of rice, enough to last them through the famine. It was a blessing. However, Shu was not greedy. Only when they faced hardship would she open the cabinet. Just like that, many peaceful years passed until her mother passed away. She took money and treasures from the cabinet to arrange her mother's funeral. After her mother's death, Shu remained single, living alone and never marrying. In the years that followed, she thought of her son every day. Shu was an old woman now, and her only wish was to see her son again after so many years, a deep and painful longing. Every day, she would stand at her door, hoping to see him just one more time. Shu was old and had no other attachments to life. She only wanted to see her beloved son again. But no matter how long she waited, she could not see him. The longing for her son made her grow frail, with no vitality left. Until the day she died. She lay on her bed, closing her eyes, her last wish to be reunited with her son in the next world. Her neighbors saw a strange phenomenon at Shu's house. It was an incredibly bizarre and wondrous sight that could not be explained. A 7-colored cloud had enveloped her roof. According to folklore, this was an incredibly auspicious omen. This house was clearly not ordinary. Feeling something strange, they went inside to look. Shu was dressed in her finest clothes, sitting cross-legged, a smile on her face, but she had already passed away. The kind-hearted neighbors were preparing to help with her funeral rites when, suddenly, a handsome young man appeared, riding on a cloud. That young man was her son, who had left all those years ago. He had kept his promise to return and arrange his mother's funeral. The son knelt before his mother's grave for 7 days and 7 nights. He also planted 2 peach trees in front of her grave to show his filial piety. Before stepping back onto his cloud to leave, he kowtowed several times. The people who saw this finally understood that he was no mortal. The 2 peach trees before Shu's grave grew lush and full. The peaches they bore were fragrant and sweet, and people called them immortal peaches.
I can't hold on! Somebody save us! The water is too strong!
This strange tale tells of a great flood and a miracle that saved a kind family. In those years, a great drought had befallen the land. Drought was everywhere. Crops would not grow, grains could not be harvested, and the people faced a terrible famine. Life was incredibly miserable. The land was barren for thousands of miles. With the harvest failed, the people had nothing to eat. Everywhere was a scene of heartbreak and desolation. Not a single drop of rain had fallen from the sky in a very long time. The prolonged heat and drought made the people's lives even more difficult and arduous. The water in the wells had also dried up. People didn't even have water to drink, let alone water for irrigation. It was a desperate and hopeless situation. The people's suffering was indescribable. They looked up to the heavens, begging for rain, for they could not survive much longer. To fill their empty stomachs, they had to eat wild vegetables and dig up tree roots. They did everything they could to survive, refusing to die of starvation, tenaciously holding on as they waited for rain. One day, a few farmers were digging for roots to eat. They were exhausted, with no strength left to continue. In the distance, they saw a person staggering towards them, who then collapsed to the ground. He seemed to be at the end of his strength, unable to go on, his life slowly fading. One farmer saw this and quickly ran forward. He wanted to see if the man was all right and if he needed help. Seeing it was a Taoist priest, the farmer carried him home on his back. As a good man, he could not simply abandon someone in distress. He had also dug up some roots, which he cooked into a soup and brought to the priest. His wife saw this and could only sigh, complaining that their own family was barely surviving. So why did he bother carrying a dead man home? The Taoist priest wasn't sick. He just hadn't had anything in his stomach for days. After drinking the soup, he revived and was no longer weary. The farmer's 2 children stared hungrily as the priest drank the soup, their mouths watering from starvation. The farmer brought the rest of the soup in the pot to his bedridden mother. The remainder was divided between his 2 children. The priest rested for half a day and recovered his strength. He no longer felt tired and could walk normally. He saw that the farmer was an incredibly compassionate man who would starve himself to save others, and who also never forgot his filial piety or his duty as a father. The 2 talked. The priest said he was traveling through the region when he met with disaster, and he sincerely thanked the farmer for saving his life. The farmer then asked the priest to consult the heavens for him. He was anxious to know when this disaster would finally pass. The priest was hesitant at first, but finally spoke. He said that this was a matter that should not be spoken of, but because the farmer had saved his life, he would reveal a heavenly secret. The priest accepted the risk of divine punishment. He said he would rather be punished by the heavens than not tell his benefactor, as repayment for the kindness. He told the farmer that the drought was only the beginning. Soon there would be a flood, a disaster even more terrifying than the drought. And he told the farmer when the flood would come. He said, "When you see 2 oxen fighting at the foot of the mountain, you must take your entire family and flee up the mountain to safety. Before leaving, the priest drew a talisman on the farmer's house. He said it could protect the entire family. Then he stood up and departed. He had fulfilled his duty and had no more attachments, only hoping the farmer would believe his words. Half a month later, the farmer went up the mountain to gather firewood. He saw 2 oxen fighting at the foot of the mountain, just as the priest had said. The farmer remembered the priest's words and was terrified. He knew a great flood was coming and that he had to act immediately. There was no time to delay. He rushed back to the village to warn the villagers, "A flood is coming." He hoped they would believe him and go up the mountain together to escape. But after so many days of drought without even a drop of rain, what he said was too absurd. Who would believe a flood was coming? The priest had warned him not to tell others. But the farmer couldn't bear to let the villagers die, so he risked breaking the taboo. He yelled at every person he saw. He knocked on every door. He tried his best to convince the villagers, hoping they would believe him. But absolutely no one believed him. Everyone thought he had gone crazy and wasn't worth listening to or trusting. They couldn't believe someone would spread such ridiculous rumors and looked at him with annoyance. Just as the farmer was going everywhere telling people to leave, the flood truly arrived. Water from an unknown source began to surge down into the village. In the blink of an eye, the water inundated the village. The raging flood swept away everything in its path. The farmer ran home shouting for his mother. He didn't want her to die in the flood. He carried his mother on his back and told his wife to carry the children. The whole family fled up the mountain to safety in a difficult and desperate escape. When they reached the mountain, he discovered that his wife, in her panic, had not brought the children with her. He looked back. The entire village was submerged in water. It was a desolate and tragic sight, impossible to forget. After the flood waters receded, the farmer returned to the village. The scene before him filled his heart with pain and sorrow. He assumed his children in the house had perished. He couldn't hold back his tears, his heart filled with anguish and pain. However, when he went inside his house to look, his 2 children were playing on the bed. The flood had gone around the house. A true miracle had occurred. The farmer, who had done good deeds his entire life, lived to the ripe old age of 82. Truly, a good man is rewarded with good fortune, a fitting and fulfilling end. This peculiar story is about a poor family living in a simple thatched cottage. Their life, though impoverished, was incredibly warm and peaceful. There was only a mother and son in the house. The son had been blind since childhood. That day it was late, but his mother was still awake. He worriedly asked why she hadn't gone to sleep yet. The gentle old mother replied that she was getting old and found it hard to sleep. Every day she would stay up late, diligently sewing shoes for her son to sell at the market to make a living. The mother and son relied on each other to live. The mother said she was working extra to save money for her son's marriage, but the son just told her not to worry too much. The mother's heart was still heavy with worry, only hoping her son would get married soon. That way, after she passed away, there would be someone to take care of him. The son jokingly said that she would live to be 100, and she laughed, saying she would become a goblin if that were true. The 2 of them loved each other very much. Although they weren't rich, the mother and son were always happy and filial. The mother urged her son to go to bed early so he would have the strength to wake up early for the market. Every morning, the son would wake up early, push a cart loaded with the fabric shoes his mother had made, and take them to the market to sell, hoping to earn a little money to get by. The shoes his mother made were simple, but the stitches were very firm, and they were comfortable and durable. Therefore, his stall was never short of customers. And so, day after day, the son diligently sold his goods. He would always happily thank his customers and tell them to come back and support him next time. Until one day, the son packed up his stall and returned home. He happily called out to his mother, announcing that he was home after a hard day of selling at the market. He saw his mother lying on the bed, covered up completely with a blanket. She just called out that the rice was warm on the stove and told him to get it himself. He thought his mother was sick, so he worriedly asked how she was. He wanted to know if she was feeling unwell anywhere. His mother replied that she was fine, just a little tired, and wanted to go to bed early. She urged her son to eat dinner and then go to rest. The son listened to his mother. After eating and cleaning up, he also went to bed. The small house fell into the quiet darkness. But in the middle of the night, he heard a sound. He saw his mother had sat up, continuing her work of sewing shoes by the faint moonlight outside the window. His mother said that she had slept too much during the day and couldn't sleep now. She again urged her son to go to sleep so he could wake up early the next day. Early the next morning, he prepared to go to the market again. He greeted his mother, but she was still lying on the bed, not getting up to see him off as she usually did. At the market, he, as usual, cheerfully advertised the shoes his mother made, inviting people to come and see the skillful craftsmanship and quality of the products. While he was calling out to customers, a female customer picked up a pair of shoes and frowned in displeasure. She complained that she didn't understand why the shoes had a strange, foul smell. It wasn't just one person. Many customers that day said the same thing. They suspected these were old shoes that someone had worn before, but oddly, the smell was not like foot odor. He also held a shoe up to his nose to smell. He noticed a faint, foul smell wafting up, but he couldn't determine where it was coming from. Just as he was in a state of confusion, a Taoist priest walking by spoke to him. He asserted that the foul smell coming from the shoes was the smell of a corpse. The Taoist priest asked who had made these shoes. The son was still in a daze and could only stammer that his mother had made them. Upon hearing this, the Taoist priest sighed and said that his mother had probably passed away many days ago, because only the deceased would leave a corpse's scent on objects. The son was furious at this, thinking the Taoist priest was talking nonsense. He shouted that his mother was still at home, so how could he curse her like that? The Taoist priest was not angry. He calmly advised him to calm down. He asked him to think if his mother had shown any unusual behavior lately. Although he didn't say it out loud, his heart sank. He remembered his mother's strange actions over the past few days and began to feel a sense of dread. The Taoist priest explained that if a person dies but still clings to the mortal world, refusing to report to the underworld, they cannot reincarnate and will gradually become a lonely ghost. Before leaving, the Taoist priest gave him a talisman. He told him that he only needed to place this talisman under his mother's pillow to help her soul pass on. That afternoon, he returned home, his heart heavy. He still called out to his mother as usual, but he had a premonition of something bad. His mother was still lying on the bed, saying she was fine. Seeing this, he didn't say anything more, and quietly prepared for what he had to do. That night, he again heard his mother get up to work. The house was in darkness, with only the rustling sound of the needle and thread echoing steadily. He also got up and asked his mother why she couldn't sleep. He realized his mother was working in the dark without lighting a single lamp. He pretended to ask why she didn't light a lamp to make it brighter. He knew that the dead don't need light, but he still asked to confirm the truth. At this moment, the son burst into tears. He had completely believed the Taoist priest's words. He sobbed and told his mother that customers had complained about the smell of a corpse on the shoes. He knew that his mother had died a long time ago, but because she was worried about her blind son, her soul had stayed behind, and her decomposed hands were still trying to sew shoes for him. He knelt before his mother, begging her to pass on soon. He said that if she didn't leave, she would soon become a lonely ghost and would never be able to reincarnate. He told his mother not to worry about him anymore, that he was grown up and could take care of himself. The mother's soul looked at her son, her empty eyes welling with tears. After crying for a long time, he took the talisman that the Taoist priest had given him and gently placed it under his deceased mother's pillow. As soon as the talisman was placed, his mother's body slumped down on the bed. Her soul had finally found peace and returned to the underworld. After burying his mother, he continued his shoemaking trade. He married a virtuous wife and had a healthy son. His mother, in the afterlife, could now rest in peace. This peculiar story is about a prince who ran a successful business and earned a considerable amount of money. Through a broker, he intended to buy a grand villa. However, he wondered why such a fine house was priced so cheaply. The seller explained that the mansion was left to him by his uncle. Since his uncle had no children, he bequeathed it to him after he passed away. The seller felt that he was used to living in the countryside and was not blessed enough to enjoy such a large house. He decided to sell the villa at an extremely low price, wanting to quickly find a buyer. The prince thought he had stumbled upon a bargain. He happily signed and stamped his seal, completing the sales process quickly, completely unaware of the mystery behind the low-priced house. The seller took the money from the sale and happily returned to the countryside. He left the villa behind without any regrets, carrying with him the secret of his uncle's death. After the prince moved in, he didn't feel anything unusual. He went about his daily life as usual, completely unaware of the strange phenomena that were about to occur. At that time, it was the season of drizzle, with rain falling intermittently. The rain was ceaseless, creating a damp and gloomy atmosphere, which made the villa even more mysterious. One night, as wind and rain swirled, the prince was sleeping soundly when he suddenly heard someone's mournful screams from the courtyard. The piercing cries echoed in the middle of the night. He woke up with a start, quickly put on a jacket, and went outside to check. Seeing the maid standing in the rain, he was not a little surprised. The maid's face was ashen with fear. Her mouth was continuously mumbling, "Ghost, ghost." She trembled, her eyes vacant, as if she had just witnessed something horrible. She was staring fixedly at a dividing wall in the courtyard. The prince looked in the same direction, but besides the falling raindrops, he saw nothing else on the wall. The maid trembled as she recounted what she had just seen. There were two people on the wall, one killing the other. After composing herself, she said she had just finished her work and was about to return to her room. When she passed by the dividing wall, she vaguely saw two figures. After a terrifying flash of lightning, she saw more clearly. It was a young man using a knife to stab an old man to death. The horrifying scene shocked her. After her terrifying scream, the figures on the wall suddenly disappeared. The maid was completely terrified, unable to believe her eyes, as if she had witnessed a supernatural scene. The prince approached the dividing wall. He patted and felt it, but found nothing unusual. After his inspection, he was certain that this was a normal wall. The prince thought the maid had been seeing things. He told her to go back to her room and rest. The maid obeyed and quietly returned to her room. 3 days later, it was another rainy and windy night. The dark night and the sound of drizzling rain enveloped the villa, signaling that another strange event was about to happen. The prince woke up, needing to use the restroom. He silently sighed, wondering when the rain would stop. As soon as he stepped out the door, a horrifying sight met his eyes. Suddenly, a brilliant flash of lightning streaked across the sky, striking directly at the dividing wall. The bright light illuminated the scene in the middle of the rainy night. On the wall, a horrifying scene appeared, so terrifying that the prince's mouth fell open, speechless. His eyes bulged. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Just as the maid had described, a young man was stabbing an old man to death with a knife. The bloody and brutal scene was clearly visible on the wall, like a horror film. The prince looked closely at the young man and felt a sense of familiarity. Wasn't that the very person who had sold him this house? The lightning flash vanished, and the image on the dividing wall also disappeared. The night and the rain returned, restoring silence to the villa, but the haunting memory remained. That night, the prince was restless and couldn't sleep. He was still haunted by the terrifying scene on the wall, unable to close his eyes. The next morning, as soon as dawn broke, the rain stopped. The sky was clear blue, as if no terrifying events had ever occurred. The prince had woken up very early and went straight to the government office alone. He was determined to get to the bottom of the matter. The magistrate knew the prince slightly, so he recounted everything he had witnessed the night before. The magistrate, upon hearing this, was also very confused and perplexed. The magistrate then led his officials to the prince's mansion. He ordered them to dig under the dividing wall, where the horrifying scene had taken place last night. The digging was not in vain. They indeed unearthed a dead body. It was the former owner of the villa, who had been mysteriously murdered. The magistrate immediately sent men to arrest the man and bring him to the government office. He was shackled, his face vacant, unable to escape his crime. When he was brought to the main hall, the deafening sound of a gavel rang out, making him flinch and tremble. The magistrate asked him why he had murdered the owner of the villa. Seeing the unearthed body of the owner, he dared not deny it anymore. He confessed the entire process of how he had murdered his owner clearly. It turned out that he was only a distant relative. Because he was lazy at home and often caused trouble, he had come to seek refuge and work as a servant at the old man's mansion. He thought he would enjoy a life of ease and pleasure, but to his surprise, the owner was extremely stingy. There were no other servants in the house. All the work had to be done by him, and each meal consisted only of plain rice porridge or pickled vegetables. After only a few days, he couldn't stand it anymore. He decided to take advantage of a rainy night to steal some valuables and run away. But he was discovered by the owner. The old man, in a rage, grabbed a stick and chased him from inside the house all the way to the dividing wall. In a panic, he took a knife and stabbed his owner to death, then hastily buried the body under the dividing wall. He found the house deeds and sold the house at a low price to the prince. The case was solved. He was brutally tortured and sentenced to death. The story does not go into detail about how he was sentenced and executed. As for the prince's house, he thought that after the former owner was vindicated, everything would return to normal. But it didn't. Every time a rainy, stormy night came with thunder and lightning, the scene of the old man's murder reappeared on the dividing wall. The wrongful spirit seemed... Finally, the prince decided to tear down the dividing wall and build a false rock garden in its place. From then on, the strange phenomena no longer occurred. This peculiar story is about a scholar. He was a man of profound knowledge, with a literary talent famous throughout the region, and was respected by everyone. It can be said that he was a very well-educated and talented person. Everyone praised his poetic and literary talent. There was no one who didn't know about it. In his home, he also had a virtuous wife. One day, while they were eating, his wife called his name a few times, but he just sat there silently without answering. Feeling that something was strange, his wife approached him. She saw that her husband's complexion kept changing, turning from green to white, as if something was wrong with him. Suddenly, he covered his face with his hand and screamed. His strange behavior made his wife very confused and scared. From then on, no matter what he did, he would always cover his face and say, Because of this, the couple's life was completely turned upside down. A healthy, educated man suddenly became crazy and confused. His friends all thought that he might have become homosexual and was no longer a normal person. Once, when the scholar was lucid, his wife asked him why he had become like this. She said to him in agony that she couldn't take it anymore. The scholar said that there was always a woman in a black dress following him. Sometimes, she would possess him, which made him feel a bit feminine. She would grab his hand to cover his face, forcing him to act like a gentle, demure lady. This had become a psychological trauma for him. Even though he didn't want to, he couldn't escape it. The scholar's wife then went to a famous monk to ask for help. She hoped that he could save her husband from this calamity. The monk agreed to help her find out the truth. He told her not to worry too much and that he would go to the underworld to find out what was going on. After that, the monk sat down cross-legged, closed his eyes, and entered a state of meditation. He was traveling to the underworld to find the answer to the strange event. After about 15 minutes, he opened his eyes. He recounted the reason why the scholar had fallen into this misfortune, a secret that had been buried for a long time. It turned out that in his previous life, the scholar was the handmaiden of the woman in the black dress. This was a master-servant relationship that had been predetermined from their previous lives. The woman in the black dress had feelings for a scholar. She would often sneak out at night to bring food to the person she loved. One day, as she was leaving, she saw her handmaiden and a few neighbors talking about something. Seeing their mistress go out, they secretly laughed, which was very suspicious. They gossiped behind her back that she was shameless, sneaking out every night to meet the scholar. Their words were filled with mockery and contempt. She felt incredibly ashamed and humiliated. The rumors from everyone made her feel that she had no face left to show anyone. Because she could not bear this humiliation, she chose to die to free herself. Returning to her room, she hanged herself. After her death, because of her resentment, She went to the underworld to file a complaint. She could not accept such an unjust death. The underworld authorities allowed her to find her handmaiden, who had reincarnated, to punish her. This was retribution for what she had caused in her previous life. The monk told the wife to invite monks to perform a ritual to help the girl's soul find peace. That was the only way to save her husband. The wife returned home and followed the instructions. She invited monks to chant scriptures and perform a ritual for 3 days, hoping to resolve this tragic karma. The scholar's condition indeed returned to normal. He was no longer haunted by the ghost, and the couple's life returned to normal. This peculiar story begins one early morning when Wang's son, in a state of panic, was running and screaming loudly, heading straight for the government office. Wang's son stammered and trembled, reporting that last night he had witnessed a blood-sucking yaksha and had narrowly escaped with his life. He begged the magistrate for help. The magistrate was somewhat skeptical, as he had never heard of a yaksha. He asked Wang's son to recount the details to verify the authenticity of the story. Wang's son began to tell the entire horrifying event he had experienced the previous night, his face filled with haunting fear. The night before, as he was sleeping soundly, strange noises began to echo from outside his house. Wang San's wife woke him up, urging him to go outside and see why the livestock in the courtyard were crying out in such agony. The painful sounds worried her greatly. Wang San guessed that a ferret might be causing trouble. He grabbed a stick, hastily put on a jacket, and tiptoed out the door, preparing for the worst-case scenario. When Wang San got close to the chicken coop and glanced inside, the sight that met his eyes terrified him to the core. He stood frozen, unable to move. He saw a winged monster gnawing on livestock on the ground. Its gruesome form and the bloody scene stunned Wang San. Wang San was so scared that his legs went limp, and he immediately fell to the ground. The wooden stick in his hand dropped, creating a loud noise that broke the silence of the night. The sound of the falling stick startled the monster. It immediately stopped eating, raised its head, and its blood-red eyes stared directly at Wang San. The monster slowly stood upright, revealing its hideous body. Its eyes were blood-red, its teeth sharp, and its long fangs curved, sending chills down Wang San's spine. The monster opened its mouth wide and let out a blood-curdling roar at Wang San. The sound seemed to tear through the night, terrifying Wang San to the extreme. Overwhelmed by the monster's roar, Wang San was so horrified that he couldn't help but urinate on the spot. He lay sprawled on the ground, motionless with fear. The monster did not attack further. It simply flapped its wings powerfully, soared into the air, and disappeared into the night. It left Wang San alone with his extreme terror. On the very day Wang San came to report, a few other villagers also came to the government office, reporting that their cattle and livestock had been slaughtered, all dead from having their blood drained. The magistrate, upon hearing this, ordered his officials to increase patrols at night. Although he was still skeptical about the existence of the monster, he could not ignore the villagers' claims. During one night patrol, the officials suddenly heard a fierce flapping of wings in the air. The sound cut through the silence, making them immediately alert. They looked up. They indeed saw a yaksha-like monster flying from a house, confirming Wang San's story, which terrified the officials. The officials hastily returned to the government office, trembling as they reported the entire truth to the magistrate. They recounted what they had witnessed with their own eyes, which sent a shiver down the magistrate's spine. The magistrate was perplexed, asking himself if yakshas truly existed. The Grand Master next to him, a man of experience, offered a plan to set a trap to catch the blood-sucking monster. The officials, upon hearing the plan, were worried. They reported that the creature had large wings, was skilled at flying, and only appeared at night, making it very difficult to catch. However, the Grand Master was full of confidence. He told the officials to go to the riverbank and look for a strange man. With this man's help, they would surely catch the monster. The officials obeyed and went to the riverbank to find the mysterious man. They were confused by the vastness of the river, not knowing who they were supposed to be looking for. One official complained that the Grand Master had only said a strange person, without specifying what was strange about him, leaving them clueless. On the riverbank, there were only fishermen. No one knew where the strange person was. As they were searching in vain, an official suddenly spotted something. From a distance, they saw a person standing on a large rock by the riverbank. The person held a long pole, his eyes intently fixed on the river's surface. His posture exuded an intense focus and extraordinary aura, truly befitting a strange person. The man said nothing, only continuously swung his arm and threw the long poles into the river. Each throw made a loud splash, demonstrating extraordinary strength. The officials were completely bewildered, finding this person very strange and not understanding why he was throwing poles into the river. Everyone found his actions puzzling. In the midst of their confusion, a small boat unexpectedly appeared on the river. The person on the boat calmly retrieved each long pole, and only then did the officials understand the purpose of the strange man's actions. On each pole was a plump fish. The officials were overjoyed. This was indeed the strange man the Grand Master had mentioned. The officials quickly approached, bowed, and explained their purpose. The strange man, hearing that it was to eliminate a menace to the people, did not hesitate and went with them to the government office. The Grand Master instructed the strange man to prepare long poles and hide on the roof of a tall building in the city. He would wait for the right moment to strike down the blood-sucking monster. The strange man hid on the tall building, patiently waiting. Time passed slowly until the middle of the night, when everything was asleep, and he did not take his eyes off the tranquil darkness. In the dead of night, gongs and drums suddenly rang out loudly throughout the city. The deafening sound shattered the silence, serving as a signal for a confrontation. The strange man immediately knew it was the signal. The blood-sucking yaksha had appeared. He instantly focused, preparing for the upcoming battle, determined to destroy the monster. He held the long pole, leaning on the railing to observe. Indeed, a monster with gigantic wings was soaring into the air, clearly visible in the night. The strange man did not hesitate and launched the long pole. The pole whizzed through the air, hitting the monster, causing it to fall hard to the ground. The magistrate led everyone to observe closely. Everyone was astonished by the creature's massive size. It was not a blood-sucking yaksha, but a gigantic bat. No one had ever seen a bat so large, which was why they had mistaken it for a yaksha. This peculiar story begins in an ancient temple. During the day, the incense here was very prosperous, attracting many villagers and followers who came to worship and pray. However, at night, the temple gates were tightly locked. The monks all had to go down the mountain to stay, as it was rumored that monsters often appeared in the temple at night. One day, a goat herder was herding his flock past there. Because there was no place to stay, and he was afraid that his flock of goats would be attacked by wild animals, he was very worried. He then went down the mountain and sought help from the monks. He hoped that he could stay in the temple for the night to avoid wild animals. The monks originally disagreed. However, the goat herder pleaded 3 times, saying that he was not afraid of monsters and only needed a place to stay, so they agreed. The goat herder herded his flock of goats into the temple. The goats slept in the courtyard, while he went into an empty room to rest for the night. In the middle of the night, he suddenly heard the goats crying out in agony. The sound echoed in the quiet night, which made him feel uneasy. He thought that a wild animal had sneaked into the temple. He grabbed his leather whip and quickly went outside to check the situation, to protect his flock of goats. When he pushed the door open to look, he was scared pale. The sight before him was something he could not believe. It was very scary and gruesome. He saw a human-like monster, with its entire body covered in green hair. It was in the courtyard, viciously biting his flock of goats, a brutal sight. The green-haired monster saw the goat herder and let out a roar. Its face was very frightening, with sharp fangs and vacant eyes. The goat herder was scared and retreated a few steps. He could not believe that he had encountered such a scary monster. He was utterly horrified. To save his life, he swung his leather whip and lashed it hard at the green-haired monster. He had no other choice but to fight for his life. The whip left a large wound on the green-haired monster's body. The wound hissed and gave off black smoke, a very bizarre and frightening sight. The goat herder was about to lash it again when the green-haired monster knocked the whip out of his hand. He no longer had any weapon to fight it. The goat herder quickly turned and ran out of the temple gate. The green-haired monster also chased him closely, with no intention of letting him go. Seeing that he was about to be caught, the goat herder climbed a big tree. He hoped that this would help him escape the monster's pursuit. The green-haired monster could not climb the tree. It had no choice but to stand at the base of the tree and guard it, giving him no chance to escape. The goat herder was both scared and tired, and he fell into a daze and then asleep. He had gone through a horrifying chase all night long and was very exhausted. When he woke up, it was already morning. The green-haired monster had disappeared without a trace, as if it had never been there, which was very strange. Having narrowly escaped death, the goat herder went to the government office to report it. He hoped that the government would help the villagers get rid of the menace. The magistrate had already heard about this incident. He immediately sent officials there to investigate, determined to find the truth behind the story. However, when they arrived at the temple, all that remained were the clean-picked bones of the goats. They did not see any trace of the green-haired monster. After a while of searching, in the backyard, they discovered a corner of a wall that was giving off black smoke. A person pointed to it and told everyone to go and look. In the corner of the wall, there was a burial mound that led straight underground. The black smoke was coming from inside it, which was very suspicious and mysterious. The magistrate ordered the officials to dig down. They wanted to see what was inside and if it was the hiding place of the green-haired monster. At a depth of 3 feet underground, they dug up a coffin. Inside was a body that was covered in green hair, which was very frightening. The magistrate confirmed that it was the one causing all the trouble. He then ordered it to be cremated on the spot to get rid of the future menace without delay. To compensate and thank the goat herder, the temple and the government office gave him some money. This gift could help him get by. The goat herder bought more goats and herded them back to his hometown. The horrifying adventure had ended, but the memories would haunt him forever.